we're going to look at choosing account software for your practice and to check if your bookkeeping software is compliant with the new proposed regulations from the Solicitors Accounts Regulations. So who are you talking to? My name is Pat McCosker. I have 32 years banking experience, 25 of those at managerial level. I've been dealing with solicitors accounts since 1986. I'm a director of computerized bookkeeping systems, which is a specialist in solicitors accounts. I also have my own software called Sol-Est software, which is specific to solicitors, and I have represented solicitors in the Solicitors Accounts Regulation Committee hearing and Solicitors Account Regulations Tribunal. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm just going to turn off my camera because I want to concentrate on the slides itself. Okay. So I'm assuming that everybody can hear me. Maybe somebody could send me a message just to let me know if they can definitely hear me okay. But our first slide is going to cover what it is we're actually going to be talking about today. So what we'll be covering is choosing the right software for your practice, which can be a daunting process. But with our guidance, you can easily identify whether a piece of software will meet not only your practice needs, but also your regulatory compliance requirements. The proposed changes to the accounts regulation will require solicitors to assess their current bookkeeping practice and adjust their procedures in order to remain compliant. And today we will look at what the changes mean for software compliance and advise you on the software features you need to have to remain compliant. And we will also look at the essential features your software should have to enable you to properly manage your practice from a compliance point of view, but also from a business perspective. If you have any questions, if you could leave them to the end, and I'll turn on the mics at the end so that you can ask the questions if you so wish. Because I would like to get through the presentation as quickly as possible for those that are on their lunch break. And we'd also welcome any contact that you want to make with us after this meeting if you require further help or assistance. So the first thing to consider is, whenever you look at a solicitor's practice, what software packages do you need? Well, from our review of it, we would see that you would require the likes of payroll software, you'd have your bookkeeping software, and then the case management software. And those things will help with the efficiency of your practice. We're not going to deal with case management software today because that's nearly a presentation on its own, but we'll look at the case management in a separate CPD course, which we'll run this day week at the same time at 1 o'clock. We'll send you notification of that as well. So then whenever you look at the softwares, what's available, you have two different types of software available. You have desktop software and you have software as a service, or cloud-based systems as they're more commonly called. So the desktop we all know about because we've all probably been used to it in some way or other, but the main selling points of cloud-based accounting software is that you can work from any device anywhere at any time. You can share a direct link to your accountant or bookkeeper. You'll have live access to all your financial information, access to reports and analytics. You can always keep up to date. Storing data in the cloud is said to be safe and modern, and ease of working with an outsourced bookkeeper is also possible with cloud-based accounting software. However, I think that every independent practice needs to look themselves at what it is that they require, and they should be asking themselves, are any of the above selling points relevant to how they run their practice? For example, is accessing your accounts anywhere at any time a necessity, or are you paying extra for a feature that you are unlikely to use? And from my experience of dealing with solicitors for the last 20 years, solicitors don't particularly require constant access to accounts, and indeed in a lot of cases probably leave it up to somebody in the office to look after that element of their business for them. So I'm not too sure that as far as accounting software is concerned, that cloud-based systems are necessarily the right thing. Also, what a lot of people don't actually know is that you can actually securely access a desktop-based software anywhere, anytime, anyway, by using a VPN such as Splashtop or TeamViewer, and the VPN is a virtual private network which is very well protected. So you could have your desktop accounting system on your computer or your server, and you could access that through a VPN like Splashtop or TeamViewer from your house or from your car on your phone, whatever you want to do. So it's not necessarily a requirement that accounting software will be cloud-based. Also, if you have a desktop-based system, it can be shared among staff on your own network. And if you want to use an outsourced bookkeeper, then they can access it also using the VPN. So the first software that I mentioned earlier on was the payroll software. And under Section 4 of the Payment of Wages Act 1991, an employee has the right to get a pay slip with every payment of wages, either when they get paid or shortly afterwards. And then from the 1st of September 2019, you must report payroll information to the revenue at the time you pay for your employees. And this can be achieved by use of an acceptable payroll package or manually through the ROS system. Now, as a tip, we would suggest that you should pay your PAYE PRSI liability by monthly variable direct debit. So what you would do is you would have your payroll software, which is linking with the revenue website. You would run your payroll every week. At the end of the month, the revenue then know exactly what it is that you owe in relation to PAYE PRSI. And they will then, if you have a variable direct debit set up with them, they will then pass a debit on your account. So whenever you come to the end of your financial year, you already have all your payments made and you're not left stuck with the bill at the end of the financial year. The thing to also keep in mind is that the WRC can carry out inspections under the legislation on any employer, and inspections were a regular feature in solicitors' practices to check the level of wages paid and records kept. Now, if you want to find out, we've put in details there of a website for the WRC where you can find out under page 16 the guide to the inspection, which just basically gives you a checklist of the things that they will actually check on. And these will be the likes of what is the gross wages, how many hours are worked, what's the rate of pay per hour, what wages, what holidays or time off have people actually taken, and you're supposed to be keeping a record of all of that, which your payroll, if it's good enough, should do. Now, if you don't want to use the web address, there's a QR code there as well, too, which if you click on it with your phone, you'll actually take you straight to the web address itself. And then if you scroll down to page 16, it gives you the actual checklist from the WRC. What should you look for in a payroll software? You're going to hear these next two suggestions mentioned on a number of occasions over the next couple of days by me. And the first thing is, I would strongly recommend that you should consider buying Irish. And you should ensure that you also get a 30-day free trial and preferably receive 1 hour of free training upon purchase of the software. So if somebody wants to sell you a piece of software, unless they're prepared to give you 30 days free trial, and are prepared to give you 1 hour of free training remotely for the proposed purchase, then I wouldn't consider the software at all. I would also avoid softwares that are tiered pricing. For example, some of the payroll softwares will price for 1 to 5 employees, and then 5 to 10 employees, and then 11 to 15, etc. And the problem with these types of software is that if you happen to have a payroll installed with 5 people employed, and then one of your employees leaves, and a new employee comes in, you still only have 5 people employed within your practice. But as far as the software is concerned, that is now 6 people that you have registered the software. So you'll end up having to pay the extra to go for the 5 to 10 employees. So there's plenty of good Irish software out there that don't do tiered pricing. And I would suggest that they're the ones that you should be looking for. There's a number of Irish softwares available too, which cover unlimited employees, and they also cover up to 5 employers. So if you're in a situation where your spouse also had a business, there's Irish software out there which will cover unlimited employees, and you could have your own practice set up as an employer, and then you could set up your spouse's business as an employer, and you could be using the same software without any extra cost for both employers. Another thing you'll hear me mention as well too on a number of occasions is the backup functionality, which is essential, and you should know where the backup is stored. There's not much point in being able to click on a button in the software and take a backup without knowing exactly where the backup has gone within your computer. And even more important than that is that a restore of the backup should be tested on a regular basis to ensure that it's working. So there's not much point in taking backups all the time if you're not testing a restore to make sure that the backup is working, because when you really require the backup, if you haven't been testing a restore and you suddenly discover your backup hasn't worked properly, then you end up with nothing. So it's very important that you do backup and restore, and that the payroll provider will give you an indication of how this is done. And really, as far as payroll is concerned, I think you really need to ask yourself, is cloud-based payroll really a requirement? And if so, if you think that it is, I would suggest that you list the reasons down as to why it's really a requirement for you before you purchase it. Personally, I find it very difficult to understand why people would even remotely consider cloud-based payroll, because I just don't see the necessity for it. Sorry, my mouse has just gone mad. Right, okay. Now, as far as the accounting software is concerned, as I said, you have 2 different types. You have the desktop software and you have the cloud-based system, and we'll deal with the cloud-based in a second. But in relation to the desktop software, the questions that you should be asking your provider whenever you are considering purchasing the software is, can you have a copy of the software for trial for 30 days, together with a free 1-hour tutorial, which can be a remote tutorial? And if the answer to that is no, then you certainly should be asking yourself the question, why not? You know, if you go out to purchase a car, at the present moment, you go to a garage, they'll give you the car to take it out on trial. As a matter of fact, in a lot of cases, garages will now give you the car for 2 or 3 days for you to take it off on trial. So if your software, your potential software provider is not prepared to give you the software for 30 days and 1 hour of free tutorial, then I think you should be wondering why you should be even remotely considering that software. During the trial and demo, check that the format is user-friendly and intuitive. You know, don't be buying software. Any transaction that you enter within any of the accounting software, you should be able to do it in one form and one form only. You know, you shouldn't have to go into one form, then click OK and go to another form, and then click OK to go back to the first form again. And there's lots of software out there that are like that. That is not what I would classify as intuitive software. So I would look at the software very, very closely, the 30-day free trial that you're going to get. I would certainly involve the bookkeeper in the trial process and ask for their feedback as well too, because at the end of the day, it's the bookkeeper that's going to be working on it. And as I said, each transaction should only have one input form. You should not be submitting information for one transaction multiple times. On the desktop accounting software, do you have a local backup facility? Can this be accessed and copied to an offsite location? Ask for a demonstration of the backup and restore process during the demo. So you should be going in there and asking them to show you how the software can be backed up. How can it be restored? If you want to check the restore, a very simple process is take a backup of the software, store it safely, then go and set up a new client on the software, and then come back and restore the backup that you had originally, and that new client that you set up should be no longer there. So then you know that your restore is working properly, and you should be checking this before you purchase the software. You want to make sure that reports can be printed in a standard format, in other words, that they can be sent to your printer without having to go to some sort of unique folder in your computer. So reports should be able to be printed in standard format straight to your printer, and I would strongly suggest export it to PDF and Excel. You know, your accountant and the auditors for the Law Society are numeric people, They will be big into Excel, and they'll be quite impressed when they deal with software that can get the reports into Excel format, because then it makes their work a lot easier. You should be asking the provider as well too, if you finish the contract, can you export your data in a usable format, and is there a cost involved in this? And these are all questions you need to be asking before you actually get into this contract, because this is probably going to be a 5, 7 or 10 year contract that you're going to have with these people, and you need to make sure that it's right from day one. Also, the answers to any of these questions, of course, in my opinion, should be coming in writing. You need to find out if the client and matter details can be imported from a CSV file into your new database. So if you're coming from software A and going to software B, you should be able to get your data for your clients and matters exported into a CSV file, and then you should be able to use that file after a small bit of doctoring to import it into your new database, so that you don't have to go and re-enter all your clients' names and addresses and matters. You should also be asking the question, what market was the software originally built for? And at the moment, there's software from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, UK, and in a lot of cases, they are not actually built for the UK and Irish market. So it's very important that you look at the software and say to yourself, right, what market is the software originally built for? If I want a VAT return in the same format that it's produced in Ireland, can I get it out of my software? And if not, why not? When we come to the cloud-based accounting software, then there are numbers of additional questions that need to be asked. And the first question is this: what role does your practice play in the protection of your data, if any? You have to remember that whenever you're purchasing cloud-based software, that the data is going off to somebody else, and you should be asking, what role is your practice playing in the protection of that data, if any? If the answer to that is that you're not playing any role in that, then you need to be asking questions. What is the software provider's role in protecting your practice data and mitigating security incidents? You have to remember that the data is not, even though you're working on the cloud-based system on your own computer, your data is not held on that computer. Your data is held somewhere in the cloud. So you need to make sure that if there is an issue that in relation to security to that data, that you have some sort of protection here. What specific data transmission do the cloud-based company encrypt? So when you're sitting at your computer and you're doing accounts and you input information onto your computer, that data is then being sent off somewhere in the cloud, and you need to make sure that that's actually encrypted before it's sent away. Don't be bought off by statements like, oh, this is 256 encrypted or this type of stuff. You need to make sure exactly how safe your data is going to be. You want to know, is your data stored in an independent server, and where does this server physically reside? So when you're in the cloud, your data is actually sitting somewhere in a server, somewhere up in the cloud. Now that could be in Ireland, it could be in America, it could be in South America, it could be in Vietnam. So you need to know exactly where it is. And if the data is not stored on an independent server, where exactly is it stored? The only other choice is that the data could be stored in what's known as a shared database. And then you need to ask the question, where is that shared database? Where does the server for it reside? And within a shared database, you also need to be conscious of the fact that not alone is your data stored in that database, but the data of Solicitor B or Solicitor C or Solicitor D is also shared in that database. So you need to be asking the question of yourself, is there a possibility of corruption between the various data? So it's very important that you find out exactly, where is my data stored? You need to find out as well too, that if you're told that your data has been stored in a certain location, is there privacy ramifications of having the data stored in that location? Just because of the fact that your data is stored in America doesn't mean that it's safe. There could be legislation in America which means that under certain circumstances, you mightn't have access to that data. So you need to be conscious of that. And you need to have proof of all these things. And you also need to know who has access to the data in the cloud. What's the provider's policy for ensuring only authorized employees can access the practice data? It's not unknown that data in the cloud has been manipulated or abused by employees of some of these companies. You should be asking, what are the procedures for suspected security violations? So if there's a security violation, do they tell you about it, or do they just decide to ignore it and go off and sort it themselves? You need to be conscious of this. This is your data, not theirs. Does the provider perform penetration tests on their system? And if so, when was the last test and what were the results? What are your terms when it comes to ownership of the data? What about what they now call nowadays metadata, which is generated? Can they sell off that metadata to other people? It's not actually your private data, but it is information in relation to that data, which can be used to be sold off for marketing purposes. And what's the provider's security measures for protecting their data centers and other facilities? So if they have data sitting in the data center, what sort of protection is there for it? What level of technical support is included in the provider's standard terms and conditions? Make sure you read them carefully. And does the provider have a disaster recovery plan? How often do they test it? In the case of a data center disaster, where do they back up your data? Under the new proposed regulations, you have to certify at the end of the financial year that a backup has been taken of your data. If you're on the cloud, how do you certify that a backup has been taken of your data? You don't know if it's been taken or not, because you can't physically see it, unless they have some way of proving to you that they can. So what I would say to you in relation to the cloud is, whilst it's very acceptable nowadays, and there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind, but that is very important as part of computing, but you need to know exactly what all the things mean whenever you talk about the cloud. And if you don't understand it yourself, then you should consider consulting an independent cloud consultancy service before moving into a cloud-based system. And there are plenty of good Irish ones out there. I'm sure if you look at them on the internet, you'll find them. But certainly, I personally would not be moving my data to the cloud unless I was very sure of most of the questions that I've just raised. So whenever you're choosing an accounting software, what should you consider? Well, the questions basically are, is it desktop-based or cloud-based? Should my accounts software integrate with my case management system, and to what extent? How do I run my accounting function? Is it in-house or outsourced? And how much do I know about accounts? Do I need to get some advice on whether the software can provide all the accounting and regulatory needs? In relation to the proposed new regulations, your software, in my opinion, should be able to provide essential reports to you to be able to meet the requirements under the proposed new regulations. So they have various different requirements, which we'll just run through at the moment. And it's proposed that a balancing statement should be performed every 3 months. So you should be asking the question, can my software produce a balancing statement every 3 months? If it can't, you should be contacting your software provider to see when this can be done. Regulation 7.2D states it's a breach of regulations for a solicitor to fail to hold sufficient funds in client account to meet all liabilities to clients. The question is, does your software produce a listing of overdrawn client accounts at the flick of a switch? In my opinion, you should be looking at this report on a weekly basis, and I would strongly recommend that you do it on a daily basis, because again, you are certifying on your report to the Law Society that you're looking into this. Regulation 13.8E obliges a review of client ledger balances for undue and unnecessary delays. And the only way that you can do this is by looking at various different ledger cards. A good software should be able to provide a report. If you want to see what ledger cards haven't operated in the last 3 months, then your software should be able to produce that type of report for you. And you should be looking to see if that report is there. If it's not, you should be asking your software provider, why not? Regulation 13.8F requires solicitors to report balances that have not operated over 2 years. And on the report going to the Law Society at the end of your financial year, you actually have to send a list of these balances off to the Law Society. And you have to, within that report, you have to specify what you have done in relation to the various ledgers that are there and what action you're going to do to ensure that they're no longer part of this particular report. The question is, does your software produce this report, preferably in Excel format, so that you can use a column for explanation? So if you get this out into Excel, then you can actually have a column sitting beside the individual balances where you can just put in your notes as to what's actually happening. And that makes it a lot easier for yourself then whenever you come to the next year or do your review on a monthly basis. All you have to do is pull the previous report and say, all right, fair enough, there's 10 of my answers of my 12 accounts already answered. So you don't have to go through them again. Regulations 1310 states it will be a breach of regulations to withdraw money from a client account without reference to an up-to-date ledger card. The question is, does your software produce a clear, easily understandable ledger card displaying balances and for the client, office and disbursement transactions? And you need to have this because the new regulations state that it's going to be a breach to withdraw money from a ledger card without looking at it beforehand. Regulation 25 of accounting records requires a record demonstrating amounts transferred from one ledger account to another. Does your software provide a report of transfers ledger to ledger or matter to matter? It's now part of the regulations that this report should be available within your software. And again, if it's not available within your software, then you should be asking the question, why not and when will it be available? And Regulation 25.2 sets out the obligations in relation to backup or the copy to be retained outside the practice. So you need to be asking the question, does your software have a backup facility and what are your plans for offsite storage? And I will ask the question again, how can you prove that your cloud-based system has a backup facility? You need to be ensuring that there is one, because you have to certify when the new proposed regulations come into place, you have to certify on a yearly basis to the Law Society that you're doing this and that you have an offsite storage. It's also important that there will be certain reports that you would need to access for good practice management. I'm just going to run through these very quickly because I'm conscious of the fact we're on 25 minutes at the moment. So an aged debtors report, which will show you any outstanding bills owed to the practice. Unbilled disbursement listing, which would also identify any disbursements that are irrecoverable, so they can be written off. Is creditors listing, which shows the length of time that money is due to suppliers, either 30, 60 or 90 days, so that you can actually do something about this or be conscious of the fact that a request could come looking for money that you may or may not have. You should be looking at your income and expenditure on a monthly basis and maybe even on a weekly basis, which will show your turnover expenses and your net surplus or deficit, and then your balance sheet will show the position of your assets and liabilities from your practice. And these reports should all be available in printable format direct to your printer from your accounting software. If it's not, then what you should be doing is asking your provider when it's going to be available, because in my opinion, you need it for good practice management. Another subject that I want to deal with is what I would classify as all-in-one packages. The marketing vibe at the moment, and I would underline the words marketing vibe at the moment, is to encourage the purchase of software that encompasses accounts and case management from one vendor. And I suppose whenever I consider this, there are three different options. The first option is case management, which is either desktop or cloud, that links with client and matter database of a desktop account software. Then you would have case management desktop or cloud that has a full client office ledger plus trial balance and journals facilities together all in the one software. And then finally, you have case management in the cloud that has client and office transactions within the case management software, but the trial balance and the journals are handled by an external cloud accounting software. This has become very common. When I consider all of these together, my best advice is that you should be considering the account software that best suits your practice and the case management software that best suits your practice, even if that means you're using two different packages. Because the majority of us are all using Windows software, if you have two different packages, you can have both of them open on your computer and you can flick between the two. So you can flick between accounts if you feel accounts A, if you feel it's the best package for you, and case management B, if you feel it's the best package for you, and you don't have to have the two of them amalgamated together. The only advantage of having case management and account software from the same vendor is that when you set up a client and matter in the case management, it's set up on the other software automatically. You should be mindful that setting up a new client or matter takes on average 15 seconds, So that's the advantage. The worst case scenario is to have, in my opinion, a case management software that incorporates client and office transactions, but the journals and trial balance are handled by another software. Now, I've been dealing with legal accounts for the last 20 odd years, and legal accounts are complicated enough themselves without having to deal with 2 accounts packages to run your business. You know, and this new modern marketing vibe that's there that is pushing this type of scenario, in my opinion, is not the best solution. So in the scenario where you find that you have an issue with your accounts, and you go to your case management provider, who's the person that has sold you the other accounts package as well, and you want to know about the problem, they're going to turn around and tell you that that's an account software problem. And the account software provider, when you go to them, will only provide support forums where you will not find a solution. And I have dealt in the last month or 6 weeks with a number of these type of cases. And to be quite honest with you, you really, really need to know your accounts to be able to manage them properly, because what you have to do is within the case management system, you have to push information from it to the cloud-based account system to be able to get it to become part of the trial balance in the journals. And any of the cases, the last 4 or 5 cases that I've looked at in the last 6 weeks, that has not happened because people don't fully understand what it is that they're getting into. So what I would say to you is that when choosing software, always keep in mind that the one area that will bring you into conflict with the Law Society is the improper maintenance of accounts. For this reason, when deciding on any software, accounts or case management or payroll, always ensure that you're using the best account software that has a reporting facility that provides all the reports required by the regulations of the Law Society, and that fully supports software and accounting queries by telephone. You make sure that whatever software accounting package that you're buying, that you will get a written guarantee that if you have accounting queries, that software accounting provider will answer those queries for you and will not refer you to another software provider and will not refer you to your accountant, both of whom will not be able to solve your problem. And the icon that we're using for this particular slide, as you can see, is a car in 2 different colors. And that is to represent what used to happen years ago when you would get a crashed car and you get some guy would take the back of one car and he'd weld it to the front of another one and sell it as a fairly good second hand. In my opinion, when you're purchasing 2 different softwares to run your accounts, one cloud-based and the other case management, then that's exactly what you're getting. Before you decide to purchase, you should ask for a demo version of the full software for 30 days with 1 free tutorial. If you can't get this, ask why not. During the demo, ask the software provider to demonstrate fully the backup and restore of data procedures. And as I've already said, there's a requirement under the proposed new regulations that this is going to be checked on a yearly basis. One other thing in relation to accounts is that in relation to software, accounting software, there are 2 different types out there. There is one called a date-based and the other is a period-end-based system. In my opinion, the date-based system is more flexible. And the reason for this is when you use a period-end-based system, you must close one period before starting to post the next. So let's assume, for example, that you've got your statements in from the bank for the month of July. You get them in on the 10th of August. You need to do your bank reconciliation and close off the month of July before you can actually start posting in August. So therefore, you're probably not going to get your posting in August done until after the 10th of the month because your statements only come in on the 10th of the month. And when you consider that's going to be a breach of regulations for you to issue a debit on a ledger card without reviewing the ledger card that's up to date, then you're getting yourself into difficulties. It's just disappeared on me again. You should also check what's the full yearly cost of the software. So is there cost for various different seats, or is it just the case that it's the software on its own? You should read the terms of the license agreement. We have actually recently checked some software websites that have reassuring promises about data safety and retrieval, and then whenever you look at the small print of their terms and conditions, it's contradicted in there. So I'd be very careful about what exactly you read in the terms of your license agreement is the most important thing. If you're transferring from software A to software B, find out who will transfer your existing data into the account software and what is the cost going to be. You need to find out who's going to take responsibility to ensure that the accounts are balanced before they're imported, and then that when they're imported that they're also balanced again, because within software you have the old adage which is garbage in, garbage out, or as we would say in Donegal, rubbish in, rubbish out. You need to ask the question, where will your data be stored? In the desktop or on the cloud? And if it's in the cloud, we've already spent enough time on that at this stage. If you want to change your software provider, you need to find out what data you will have access to and for what period and at what cost. If your data is not extractable in a usable format, the software provider is essentially holding you to a hostage, and all data should be freely extractable in CSV format at least. And that applies whether you're dealing with desktop-based software or cloud-based software. You should be able to at least bring it out in CSV format so you know exactly where you stand. You should be checking to ensure that reports can be printed in standard format, PDF, and importantly, exported to Excel or CSV. You should find out what level of accounting support is available from the software provider for your accounts and what is the cost involved in that, if any. Once again, I would say consider buying Irish, as there are some very good Irish products which are written for the Irish Tax and Law Society regulations. And I would research the company that you're dealing with. Are they really Irish based or just a representative office or telephone number in Ireland? There are a number of providers out there at the present moment that give you telephone numbers in Dublin, and whenever you go in and research it, there's no office there at all. So you should also ask yourself the following: am I confident in my ability to supervise the accounts? So the bookkeeping function of the firm may be left to one person within that firm, but you have to remember that the practice manager or partner or sole practitioner will still take ultimate responsibility for the accounts as far as the Law Society are concerned. And you need a system that can print reports that enable both financial and compliance management. And if you need training or assistance with the compliance and financial management, you should search for a software provider that just doesn't provide a product, but can also provide value to your business with additional compliance and financial advice. Finally, I'm coming up to the last couple of slides. Another question to look at is, do I need to combine bookkeeping and case management functions? While this can save some input time when setting up plans, there's no necessity to have your case management and accounts linked. If your ideal case management system can only supply an inferior accounting package, then having standalone options is a more efficient choice in the long run. And if you have found an accounting system that perfectly suits your needs and it is compatible with a good case management system, then of course take this option, but do not compromise compliance for a minor convenience. Different checklists. Check the website of the people that you're buying from for previews. Check that the software complies with basic accounting standards. The software can produce all the reports you need to stay on top of your compliance obligations. That your software can produce reports you need to run your practice efficiently. That you as the person responsible can use the software and produce all the reports you need to monitor compliance. Check that the software can be easily backed up and that you fully understand the restore process. Consult your IT technician and put a backup system in place and store tested and verified copies of your backup off-site. If you use or are considering purchasing online software, we recommend you read the terms of your contract in relation to data access, ownership, storage, backup and recovery. Contact your provider and ask if they take regular backups, where they are stored and how they can be restored. Also find out if your data can be downloaded in CSV format or similar to allow for extraction of data in the case of termination of services or for your own backup purposes. Because don't forget, there is no guarantee that whenever you move to a new provider that you're going to be with that provider for a period of longer than 5, 7 or 10 years. Because what happens with a lot of providers is that don't keep their product up to date, and then you find after a number of years that their product is not sufficient for you and you need to go to change, but you cannot get access to your data. So just be very careful of this. The next couple of slides are just promotional stuff in relation to ourselves, so I'm just going to skip through them. So we can chat to anybody that wants to in relation to the whole thing. And we have our own software, and our software is fully compliant with the proposed new regulations. So what I'm going to do now is I am going